Hi guys, welcome to Crazy Burger. So Blaze have kindly sent us an Evercade Alpha Megaman Edition Bartop arcade machine 2 review. Thank you very much for that. However, my big thanks has to be to you, my viewers, who absolutely bombarded the comments recently, suggesting Blaze send me one of these for review. So for me, thanks very much guys, I really appreciate it, and I'll try and do this arcade machine justice in this review. So to the unboxing itself, it comes in a fairly sizable box, so you're not going to sneak it into the house anytime soon if you're afraid of the other half noticing. It does seem to get bashed around a little bit as well, which is a tad concerning, but anyway, it seemed fine when I took it out the box. Now it comes in 4 different versions. We've got the 2 standard versions, Megaman and Street Fighter 2, and also the same again but with Sanwa controls. Now I've got a Sanwa controls version coming at the end of November, the Street Fighter 2 one, so I will review that nearer the time. So this standard version does come complete with competition grade arcade controls and the 8-way joystick, although I was a little bit concerned that there was no plastic covering over the front face there. Through time and wear and tear, that will probably become a bit of a problem, although Blaze have said they have got some sort of protective paint over this, so fingers crossed it does work. Only time will tell, I guess, a year down the line if this is becoming a problem. The specs are on the screen if you're interested in that sort of thing. The best thing here is probably that 8-inch high resolution IPS screen. It is absolutely fantastic. Now, as mentioned earlier, there is a light up marquee bar at the top, and you can swap that with any of the other marquee panels that came with your arcade machine. You can see those plastic sort of covers there are just covering the screws that hold the unit together, and on each side there is those speakers, and obviously you can see the great detail on the cabinet there. It does look absolutely fantastic, no doubt about it. There's more detail on this cabinet compared to the Street Fighter cabinet, but that is just how the Street Fighter cabinet was back in the day, so it is obviously representative of those early cabinets, but those graphics are really nice on the Mega Man version. So there's not a lot of detail on the top or the back. There's probably a little bit of a vent there just to stop from overheating, but this is not going to be an issue with this device. It is only a 1.5 GHz processor, same as the VS, and only on the back is that slot there to put in your power supply. That is basically it. There's no HDMI out. On the bottom there is the 4 plastic feet there, and that keeps it fairly sturdy. So one of the first things you'll probably have to do is remove the plastic covering that's on the front of the screen and on the marquee. Now on the front of the screen it was an absolute pain to come off. Now I didn't get all the bits off, so you might see a lot of these bits appear within the video. You'll probably have to unscrew it to get every single bit off. A bit of a pain if you ask me. Now you also have to take off the marquee, which is very simple to actually remove and replace. There's a little plastic covering over that as well, which you probably have to remove to get started, and you can make your choice of replaceable marquees, whichever you prefer. I'm just going to go with the Mega Man for this, and that does light up when you actually start. Now obviously, talking about start, there is a quick start guide included. I'm not really sure many people will need it, but it is there if you want to refer to it. Now there is obviously plugs included within the box for the various different outlets across Europe, and obviously wherever you're buying this for in the US as well, so there should be something for everyone. Now it is a fairly low powered device, so it will not have any issues with overheating or anything like that at all. Now when you turn on for the first time, you'll have to put in your Wi-Fi details. Obviously there's Wi-Fi built in so that you can get some updates and choose your language. But just beware, it does take some time. There is a patch as soon as you log on. I'm sure there'll be a day 1 patch as well, so it will take some time to get started. Okay, before we actually get stuck into the game, we're going to talk through all the things that we've got access to. So obviously the first menu system you have here, the Alpha button at the top, the A, you've got your access to your 6 arcade inbuilt games. So obviously we have Mega Man, the Power Battle, Mega Man 2, the Power Fighters. Now both of these games aren't really exclusives as sorts. You can actually play them on Capcom Arcade. So even though I've never actually played them myself, they are still available on modern consoles. But this probably is a better way to play them rather than on your consoles. on a joypad. But yeah, you've also got the classic Strider, you've got Knights of the Round, which is also a fantastic scrolling sort of slash 'em up type of thing. Final Fight, probably one of my all-time classic sort of arcade games. Now, interestingly enough, on all the games, it will, if you leave it, it will run into a demo mode. You can activate that as well by pressing Y, and it will also go into a demo mode, and it will just basically keep on rerouting through the demo of the actual game, and you can choose whatever game you want, or it will just do it randomly, and you can turn that off as well in the actual settings. But if you just want to come back out, just press B. We've also got Carrier Air Wing, scrolling shoot 'em up, which is actually really good fun, pretty decent, and that's it. That's all the inbuilt games. Now, it is a bit disappointing that we have to buy 2 of these. If you want to, obviously, the Street Fighter version, you need to buy that one separate. It would have been nice to have all 12 games on the one arcade unit, but I guess it is what it is. The license would have been crazy expensive. They probably would have had to have doubled the price of this to maybe 400. I don't know. Whatever it is what it is. We need to deal with that. But anyway, outside that, we'll play these games in a little minute. I'll just walk you through all the menu. So you've got your Evercade section where you need to put your Evercade carts into the slots below. We will cover that later on in the video. You've also got your sort of Game of the Month section. This is where the star, that's why you set up to your Wi-Fi, and you'll get access to a Game of the Month. There's usually an update or so every month for that. For Game of the Month, which is obviously part of Indie Heroes collection, which will get released January or February 2025. Now, we'll be getting a game every month from April to December usually, and then you get a cartridge. They will release that on February 2025, I think. So we are actually due another game. At the time of this video, we've still got Flea 2, which is really good, but it's pretty tricky and frustrating. But yeah, we are due another sort of game very, very soon. We've also got hidden games. Now, before we started, this was obviously 0 out of 9. Now, there is actually 10 hidden games if you've got an EXP, but there's obviously one game that's not been brought across to this, much like the EXP. The VS has 10, I think the EXP has 9. So there's one game, I think Hummings is the only game that's not unlockable on this at present. However, there's also another game that's not unlockable. Obviously, if you don't want to know these secrets, I'm not going to share too much. I will share the first one. There was a secret code that you can enter, which I'll show you, and you put that into the secret code section, and it will unlock a game. But there's one game that wasn't unlockable as part of this, and I'll cover that maybe later on in the video. So there's also the library section where you've got, you can browse all the carts that are available on Evercade. It breaks them down by console, arcade, and computer. Obviously, arcade is the purple label, red is the console, and blue is the computer label. And there's a lot of good sort of carts out there. There's tons of variety if you want to add to your library for your alpha, but just bear in mind, not every cart and game will be perfect for the alpha setup. Now, you can also browse through the different carts that are coming up individually. You can browse through all the different games as well if you want to. It's a nice addition to this, but I think more or less this is probably for new users rather than anything else. It's not really a section that I browse through very often. And lastly, we have the settings. Now, by default, we've got this sort of nice blue setting, but you can change a few different things. You've got your aspect ratio, your pixel perfect full screen. You might want to mess about with that. For me, I think you'll probably always have it on either original ratio, or you can make it pixel perfect if you want, but it might make the screen a little bit smaller. And full screen, I'm not sure you're going to sort of use that too much. Now, I have got subtle scan lines on. I thought it looked much better, especially for the arcade games. I will go into that when I'm going through the games. You can put some bezels on if you want. It changes the bezels top and bottom, and maybe sometimes on the side as well, depending on what game you're actually playing. Dynamic rate control, I've put that to enabled. That might not necessarily be for the games inbuilt for arcade. It might be more for other stuff like the home computer games, for example. You've got auto demo mode, as we discussed earlier in the video. You can have that as off, or it will just kick in every 2 minutes, and it will just keep playing a demo until you actually start playing a game. Now, also, sorry, last there's also, you can turn on scan lines for the menu if you want. Not really sure, but it's up to you obviously what you do. Now, you've got different themings here. It's defaulted to the Megaman theme, but you can change that to whichever theme you like. That one's probably pretty similar, so that was a bit probably pointless, but there's different themes, like the dark theme I quite enjoy as well, and it just sort of changes at the touch of a button. Obviously that is a preference, I'm not sure which is actually best. I'll keep it to the default Megaman for the purposes, I guess, of the video, but I'm not really sure it's my favourite version of all of them. Now you've also got access to your sound. You see we've got the sound currently set to quite a little bit. If you want to put it up, you can do, or down, but yeah, it is what it is. You've got different options there. Now you've got the network. Obviously this is where you connect to your Wi-Fi. Accessibility, this is a toggle high contrast mode if you want to do that. You've got various different languages that you can choose to. You've got the system, check for updates. Now you will probably get periodic updates. Most likely it will be every month when it's game of the month, or maybe there's something that needs fixed that's probably affecting the systems. There should be a day one patch as well for the alphas that I'll cover a little bit later on in the video, and there's obviously specific reasons for that. I'll go through that. There's a factory reset. If you want to do that, you can enable or disable analog support for third-party controllers. Now that may be if you want to try some analog controllers, if you're playing something like Glover or something like that, that's probably a little bit better with analog control. Map controllers, if you've got a controller that you want to map and change, you can press this button and then hold any button in a controller that you've actually inserted into the alpha, and you can basically put it to any buttons that you choose. Reset the controller mappings, but we've just talked about reset what you've just done. There's also a force patch cartridge option. If you've got any Evercade sort of cartridges that may play up, may not work, there's this section here that sometimes can bring your carts back to life if they actually stop working. Hopefully you never get to use that, but sadly it's something I've had to use on Evercade, and it has worked sometimes and sometimes it hasn't. But anyway, that option is there if your Evercade cart does apparently brick. So we've got legal and support. It just goes through a whole load of sort of copyright details, credits. It sort of gives you an idea of who actually worked on the alpha with regards to was it Blaze and obviously other people besides that. Pretty cool. Lots of people there that helped, so great job guys. And you also got the secret section that I just talked about. Now this is used for most likely unlocking some secrets, maybe some screenshots or something, and even secret games that we've just discussed. And if you do happen to unlock a secret game, it will appear as part of the hidden games in here. I've got 8 out of 9 games unlocked. There's one doesn't currently unlock, and that's due to the fact that it uses sort of L2 and R2 buttons to unlock, and that's not currently workable on the alpha. We've only got L1 and R1 buttons. You can insert a controller obviously which would have those L2 and R2 buttons, but it still doesn't work by doing that. Hopefully that will be fixed on a day one patch. Now just for the record, the game in mention is actually Gotris, which was unlockable by holding down the L1, L2, R2 and R1 button at the same time. So that's not currently unlockable. I think they're going to maybe try and change the control or the way to unlock it so that you can actually play it on this system. Nothing really to do with the games. It's a Master System game, so it's nothing to do with compatibility or anything. It's just the fact that it's using the all the shoulder buttons to unlock, so it's not currently unlockable. If you want to know how to do this, guys, I've made loads of videos. There's also the site evercade.info, which I'll leave a link in the description if you want to look at that and unlock those secret games. There's some nice games in there that most of them actually work quite well on the alpha. Okay guys, so without further ado, let's have a quick playthrough all 6 games that are included on the Evercade alpha, and I'll give you my thoughts about them as we play through them. So let's get started with Megaman. Now as usual, you've got loads of information about your games here. Megaman, you can play through Megaman 1 and 2 base levels, 3 to 6 and 7. And there's some information about the games. There's also the controls. Don't forget there is information about the controls. There's also stats, how long you've played the game, and a few other things like that there. So don't forget to check the controls if you want to know how to actually play them. Now obviously if you see this little sign here, this is to do with photosensitivity warning about the game. So if you see that, and obviously if you're susceptible to these sort of flashing images, then you may not want to play these games. And you can also jump into your last save if you use save states as well, but we'll cover that in a little minute. You can play in competition mode, which means you can't actually use those save states if you wish. You can also edit the controls within the game, which is up to you. If you don't like the default layout, you can go into edit the controls, change it to how you would actually prefer, which is actually a nice touch for here. You can also reset the game stats if you wish. So one of the first things that annoys me about the Evercade Alpha is the start and select button, I feel as if are round the wrong way. Now this is the start button, this is the select button. With select button you obviously use to insert a coin. Personally I would always have preferred it to be this way, and then the start button would be here, but that's just a little bit of a nitpick. I'll keep defaulting to try and press here, but anyway, it is what it is. Now I've never really been a big Megaman fan. And the sort of arcade games are a little bit different to the actual Mega Man series that you'll get on the NES and SNES. But yeah, it's basically quite simple. You're just trying to defeat each of the sort of enemies. You can hold down the button for a special fire as well. But yeah, it is a tricky game. The first level is usually quite straightforward. But yeah, that energy doesn't last, and I'm not really that great at this anyway. The buttons are pretty responsive, there's no doubt about it. It is one of those games that you just find yourself, you are just constantly pressing the button. Now you can hold down the X button, which is actually defaulted to auto fire, which is pretty helpful. Meaning you don't need to keep bashing away at the buttons and sound like an absolute maniac, which is sometimes what I am. But anyway, the first level is pretty straightforward. Once you lose your life, you can just insert a coin and start and just continue from where you've actually left off. So it's not going to be the most difficult game. And as we mentioned earlier, you can jump into your save states, and also you can change the display settings whilst you're in here as well. As I said, without the scan lines, I don't think it looks as good. Personally, I think it looks like that authentic arcade style once you turn those sort of scan lines on. You see, this is how it would be defaulted, but if we turn those scan lines on, then you can have subtle or strong. There's not a massive difference between the two, but personally I think it looks so much nicer having those scan lines on. It just gives it that, as I said, that authentic arcade feeling. Now, I'm not particularly great at these games, but I still enjoy them to a point. Not a heck of a lot of variety. Now, one of the nice things, once you've defeated one of the boss, you can then change, obviously press R1, you can do a weapon change, and you then can use the weapon that you've acquired from that boss. But as I said, you can just insert a coin, continue off, and you'll start with a full lot of health again, which is pretty nice. As I said, you can then use the weapon that you acquired from the previous boss, and then as you go through it, you will obviously get more and more weapons until you actually finish the game for good. But yeah, it's not bad, it's pretty good, but it's not my favourite game on this sort of bunch of 6 games that we have on the Alpha. As I said, you can save your progress. I've made a few different saves here. You can then load in whatever game you prefer that you're on. And that is really handy. That's one of the nice things about the Evercade Alpha that's probably better than maybe like your arcade 1-up machines. You don't have this function on those machines. So I think Mega Man 2, there's a bit more variety, there's more characters to choose from, and there's various different endings depending on which combination of characters that you actually choose. Now, you can play a lot of these games 2-player games, which we'll cover a little bit later on in the video. You can play some of the games even 3-player game, but I'm not really sure this size of unit really is great for multiplayer. But as I said, we will cover that later on in the video. Sometimes I forget there's the auto fire button here to use. But yeah, it is pretty much more of the same. You've got a few dash abilities and stuff, but it does get very, very repetitive, there's no doubt about it. As much fun as it is, I think through sort of repeated use it gets a little bit boring quickly. Obviously if you love Mega Man stuff, then I'm pretty sure you will love this. But personally I think the Mega Man games are actually the weakest games on this arcade machine. Okay, moving on to the classic Strider, which has obviously appeared on pretty much every Capcom device or Capcom sort of thing that's been released. I remember playing this back in the arcades way back, probably even in the early 90s at some point. And I enjoyed it to a point, but it is a tricky game, very, very tough. No doubt an absolute classic. Very, very difficult right enough. something you're really just better off keep on moving, because those enemies basically just keep on spawning in and spawning in. Just keep running, hope for the best. Oh yeah, pick up the enemy, the upgrades as well. Yeah, I think I've made a mess of this. 100%. Obviously not the toughest boss that you will face. As much as I enjoy playing Strider, I've never really made a heck of a lot of progress on it. I found it extremely tough to play through. And the fact that you do get sent back to the start of some of the levels, which means it is a lot tougher than some of the arcade games that are on here. Okay, on to Knights of the Round, and now this one I really like. And now, interestingly, you can play this one as a 3-player game. Now, to play 3-player games, we will cover this a little bit more in the video, but you have to go to these 3 dots that are here, and then you have to choose play in 3-player mode, and then start the game like that. Now then obviously you need to make sure you've got another 2 controllers inserted into the USB slots at the bottom. But as I said, we'll cover multiplayer a little bit later on in the video. It's probably not a game I've played an awful lot of, to be honest, over the years. I definitely did not play this in the arcades. Don't remember seeing this one at all. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, I just don't remember it. I think the first time I actually played this game was on the Super Retrocade, which was a console I bought a few years back. Which was a lot of fun, and that actually had a ton of Capcom games on it, and it was great. It was probably one of my first introductions to sort of mini consoles like that. There's no doubt this is a terrific sort of slashing up, beat 'em up, whichever you want to call it, and it's a lot of fun to play. And as I said, you can play this 3-player game, but I think playing any multiplayer game on this sort of alpha probably isn't that great, to be honest. The screen is too small to make that usable. I have to say, Knights of the Round is a fantastically fun game to play, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm still obviously playing through it. It is great stuff. Okay, we've got the classic Final Fight. Now I have to say, this is probably one of my all-time favourite arcade games, and this is one I played a ton of in the arcades in the early 90s. Absolutely loved it. Also played 2-player games as well when I was in the arcade, and it was probably the best way of actually playing it. But it's still fun as a single player. In this game you can just keep inserting coins, carry on, you can create your save states as well, which is great stuff. Now, I personally always preferred the default character of Cody, but usually throughout the game I would chop and change between all 3 characters depending on where I am in the actual game. And I have to say, playing this, obviously I've played this game more than any other arcade game on this device, and this definitely plays fantastically well. The emulation is probably as perfect as it could be. The buttons are very responsive. Yep, I really cannot fault it at all. And it does sound very, very good. And it's one of those games that I just could not stop playing. Obviously, if you remember, you do press down both buttons at the same time for those special moves. You've basically just got a punch and a jump button, but there's lots of different combinations of moves between those buttons. Now, there's no doubt this game is absolutely superb, and for me it probably still stands there as one of the best beat-em-ups ever actually released. I think it's absolutely amazing. I really don't think there's many games that surpass this at all. Maybe the Streets of Rage series was pretty close, and that's what was the big competition at the time on the consoles. Obviously the Mega Drive had the Streets of Rage series, and I think the Final Fight series were all sort of released on the sort of SNES, but I don't think the Final Fight series was anywhere near as good as the first one. The sort of subsequent games just weren't quite as good.
Oh my god!
As I said, this is one of those games I just could not put down, and I just kept on playing until I actually completed it. I just had to. It's so good. And I've probably played this and completed it so many times over the years, even on the EXP that was released a couple of years ago by Evercade, which had the inbuilt games, and obviously Final Fight was one of them. But I have to say, if you're going to play Final Fight, this is definitely one of the best ways of playing it on an actual arcade machine. Okay, last game that's built into the alpha, we've got Carrier Air Wing. Now this will give a little bit of variety to the games that are included. This is obviously a scrolling sort of shoot 'em up, and it's pretty good too. Now one question I want to know here is, why is Sean Connery in this game? I have no idea. It's just a pity we don't have the voice. Maybe I'll have to replicate that. Maybe I won't. Miss Moneypenny, come on. Now, I'm not a big shoot 'em up fan, but I actually quite enjoy this game anyway. It is pretty good. And obviously you've got different sort of upgrades and stuff as you're playing through the game. You've got your special weapons too. As shoot 'em ups go, this is actually pretty decent. Now, I think it might have been nicer to have the 1944 series instead of this, but this one is still pretty decent and good fun to actually play. Okay guys, so that's the 6 inbuilt games. They're a reasonable selection. I'm not really sure there's enough there to actually warrant you or even sway you to actually buy this on its own. I think the thing that comes into its own here is adding your own Evercade cartridges. Now you can expand your library by purchasing Evercade Carts. Now not all of them are going to be suitable playing on this little device, but there will be a ton of stuff out there that will be fantastic on this device. Okay, there's no doubt if you purchase one of these machines, you'll probably want to expand your library a little bit by purchasing Evercade cartridges. Now this is just a selection of them. Now I would say definitely the arcade carts are the ones that you'll probably want to purchase more than any other. These are obviously meant to be played this way, but you will probably find some games on console collections and even the home computer games collections that would probably work quite well. Now I'm not going to go over all this in this video, it's going to take far too long. Now I will go through these separately, what games work, what carts work, what carts are probably best to purchase and which ones to avoid that don't really work great on the Evercade Alpha. But I think first and foremost we will concentrate on the arcade carts, because no doubt they will play pretty well on the Evercade Alpha. But before we do that, I'm going to have a quick look at some games that are actually unsupported at the time of this video. Now if you want to play Evercade carts, obviously all you need to do is insert the carts into the slots at the bottom here. One or two, it really doesn't matter, but I guess preferably you want to stick the cart into the first slot, and then you will get the option on the screen to play your Evercade cartridge. It will then be recognised as a cart, and then you can play through those games as you would normally. Okay guys, so first up we'll look at the unsupported games. Now this should change. There is supposed to be a day one patch that should fix a lot of these unsupported games, but there's probably quite a few here that quite surprised me. But anyway, let's have a quick look. The first unsupported game, as we probably mentioned earlier, was actually a secret game called Gortrus. Now I have unlocked quite a few different games here. But you can see here we've got one it isn't quite unlocked, which is Gortrus, because it's using all shoulder buttons to actually unlock. So hopefully that will be patched on day one, so you can play that on your alpha. Now the next one is actually on the Gattelco Arcade 2 cart. Now this is Maniac Square. There is also a prototype version that you can unlock by holding down I think the shoulder buttons to activate the game. But obviously there's no shoulder buttons, no R2 and L2 button to be able to do that, so currently as it stands you can't play that version of the game, which is actually better than the version that's included. But anyway, hopefully that will be fixed in the day one patch. Not guaranteed about this one, to be honest. I'm not entirely sure whether this will become an option or not, but you can play this on the EXP or the VS if you want to actually play the prototype version of it. Now, another game that doesn't actually work, or is currently unsupported anyway, is Cathedral. You might have seen this in another sort of review video. Now this should work in day one when we get the patch. Now this obviously was a problem as well on the Super Pockets. It just needs a little bit extra work to get it compatible. These games are actually sort of games that are meant to be played on Evercade. They are native games, obviously built specifically to play on Evercade. And at present they need a little bit of extra work to get them supported, but as it stands at the time of this video, Cathedral is unsupported. Okay, another sort of game series that's not supported is Duke Nukem 1 and 2 Remastered. which probably doesn't surprise me. This one is also a natively running game on Evercade, but sadly it's not quite up and running. Hopefully this will be sorted for day one, but at present you can't actually play. I think this one would probably work quite well on the Evercade Alpha, and those games are absolutely fantastic, so fingers crossed this will be sorted for day one. Now finally guys, there's a couple of games on Indie Heroes Collection 3 that are not currently supported. Now, I haven't played every game that's on Evercade, that would just take forever. I'll probably go through it at some point over the coming weeks anyway, but I have checked every cart. I've went through every game that and just checked to see if there was any unsupported sort of stuff there. And most of the games that are unsupported are actually natively running games. Now this one is Bubble Seahorse Adventures, which isn't supported. It is running natively on Evercade, as I said, but hopefully that will be fixed for day one patch. Now I'm not really sure anyone is really going to be purchasing an Evercade Alpha to play Bubble Seahorse Adventures specifically, but obviously if you want to play it, it's currently not supported. But anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. Hopefully it will be working on day one. Now a game that you probably would want to purchase and play on your Alpha would be Donut Dodo, but unfortunately that one is also currently not supported. Again, it should hopefully be fixed for day one when this officially launches at the end of November. Now this is actually an arcade style game which should work really well on the Alpha, so I'm interested to see how that works when it does actually get fixed. So fingers crossed, we will keep an eye on that and update that on the day one when it does get fixed, hopefully. So guys, I'm going to go through a few Evercade games and carts now. I won't be going through too many, just give you an idea of what else is out there, what's good fun, and what probably you should avoid. But I will go through this in much more detail in a separate video at some point. Now just before I move on, there was a few times where I'm trying to insert a cart into slot 1, for example, and it's not being recognised, but it did seem to work when I put it into slot 2, which is a little bit weird, but for the best part, all carts did work, but sometimes they didn't get recognised in slot 1, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. But anyway, this is an upcoming collection to a Plant Arcade 3, and there's some fantastic games on this, there's no doubt about it. Not really sure it'll be perfect for the Alpha, and I'm going to obviously give my reasons why. So there's no doubt that there's some great games on this collection, but the fact that it's got this vertically aspect ratio, the Tate mode, probably isn't ideal for this screen. You can't obviously swivel it on its side, which I've maybe suggested previously. There's no Tate mode function at all. This is basically what you have. You can stretch the screen, have it in full screen, but it really doesn't look great at all. I think the only way of playing it is probably like this, but it really is up to where you think this is worth sort of buying and this is your viewpoint. Despite the fact these games are absolutely superb, it still probably isn't great for this small screen. I think the best way of probably playing this is probably in the Tate mode on your EXP or even on a bigger screened television. Although these are fantastic games and they play brilliantly on the Alpha, there's no doubt about it, but you will have to put up with a slightly smaller screen. Now as I said, you can change the display settings if you want to be absolutely insane. You can play it like this, but really it's all stretched, it doesn't look right, it's completely wrong. Okay, now one of the benefits of this collection is you can just hold down the Y button for auto fire. You don't have to keep pressing the button, which is nice. Now this should come into effect for pretty much all the arcade carts at some point. We are just waiting on that day one patch that hopefully will fix that, and you'll be able to use the auto fire function for compatible games, which means you don't need to keep pressing the button like a maniac and get a little bit of finger fatigue. You can just hold down the button and play it that way. Now some games have defaulted like that, but other games you can use that Y button as the auto fire, which is fantastic stuff. Now hopefully that will be fixed for every game that is compatible on the arcade collections in the day one patch. Okay, one thing I wanted to highlight was probably burger time, also on Data's collection. The sound of those burgers going down isn't great at all. It sounds terrible. Now I'm not sure if that's emulation or that's how it sounded, but it just doesn't sound good at all. Probably one of those games you want to play in silent rather than with the sound blasting, because it sounds awful. It does stick now and again, just like it does on the EXP, but yeah, it's probably not my most favourite game to play. Now you may also want to try your hand at some of the old classics such as R-Type on the Irene Collection 1. But yeah, not really a game I want to play too much of because it is absolutely brutally tough. Classic for sure. Just wish I was better at these games, I really do. Yeah, I made that look easy. Now this is World Rally on Galco Arcade 1, and this game is fantastic, and interestingly enough it works amazingly well using the joystick, which actually surprised me. I thought it would be pretty rough, but it's still handled fantastically, maybe even better than it does on the EXP. I just thought I'd play a variety of different games just to sort of check out the controls especially, because obviously every game does have a different feel, and obviously played some platformers, shoot 'em ups, and this is obviously a driving game as such, and it still works fantastically well, and I'm just hopefully trying to set a decent time which would prove that the joystick and buttons are perfect for this. Not bad at all. Pretty decent time, I would say. So I've done a little bit faster, but that still is pretty good stuff. Now I'm not really sure a lot of people are going to be buying Atari Arcade to play on this, but obviously the option is there to play the old classics such as Pong. Now the emulation has been all over the place a little bit on Evercade, and I still don't think it is particularly perfect. I think it's, for me, it's running a little bit too fast and making the game really, really tough. But yeah, if you still love the old Pong, it's here if you want it. But personally, I think it just doesn't feel right just yet. Certainly improved from the early days when it was first released on Evercade, but still, I think it's a brutal experience. Now that sort of brings me to a little subject I was wanting to talk about, is that if you've got a Super Pocket, you know you can choose easy mode on that, and obviously play games a little bit that are quite hard, maybe make it a little bit more playable. But obviously on the Alpha there isn't that option. I'm wondering why they haven't included that. That would be nice, but that could be something that's upcoming very soon. Hopefully we will get access to dip switches, or even some additional options to maybe change some things within the games, add more lives, make the games a little bit simpler and easier to play, because there's no doubt some of these games are absolutely brutal to play through. Now Pong being one of them, I think it's due to the emulation more than anything else, but there are some games there that are punishingly hard that would benefit from those dip switches, or some additional modes to make the games a little bit more accessible and easier to play. Fingers crossed that does happen. It has been rumoured for quite a long time now, and hopefully it might even be in a day one patch. I'm not entirely sure. I know it is in the background, so hopefully that does happen at some point very soon. There's no doubt there's some classic stuff out there that you probably want to enjoy on your Alpha, and this one is Rodland from the Jalico Collection 1, and it's absolutely brilliant. This is definitely one of my most favourite arcade collections. Now, as I said, I will go through these arcade and each cart in further detail in other videos. I think there's obviously too much to go through in the one video, but this game is fantastic and works really well on the joystick. It certainly doesn't stick. There's no issues whatsoever. Okay, so that's a look at some of the arcade collections. Now there's also a lot of console collections, home computer collections as well, and happy to say the Namco sort of museum collections work on the Evercade Alpha. It's not an external sort of device, it's got its own inbuilt screen, which is why it's allowed to work on here. Now if you follow for Evercade, you know that the Namco museum collections don't work on the VS, and you can't play them on your TV or a monitor. Do work in the EXP, the Super Pockets, but just not on the VS. Happily to say they do work on here, so you can play through some of these. Now these are probably worth buying. Unfortunately they are legacy carts, meaning they're no longer manufactured, but you should still be able to pick them up at a crazy price on eBay. But a lot of these are sort of arcade conversions, albeit on the NES or maybe the SNES. Some of the games work really well and others don't. Some stuff that works really well would be stuff like Galaxian, which is obviously an arcade conversion, and happy to say it is fantastic on here. It just feels like it was tailor-made for this. Now I definitely feel there's going to be a few games that are going to be completely revitalised and you might even get more life out of them by playing them on the alpha. But some games that you think would work well don't work well at all. Now, some games you might think would work well would be Pac-Man, but I guess this is not the arcade version, this is the NES version, and it's absolutely horrible on this joystick, and I actually feel it's almost unplayable, because you constantly get stuck, and meaning you're going to get caught by the ghost at some point. There's no way that you will get through this game very far. Obviously you can plug in your own sort of joypads and stuff, which we'll cover very soon, along with multiplayer, but as it stands, this game is practically unplayable, which sadly would be the case for a lot of games on other sort of carts, but I'll go through that in more detail at some point in later videos. So one game that probably doesn't work that great on the sort of alpha is probably Xenocrisis. Now it controls fine utilising the joystick, no doubt about it, but because of the button layout, it's not a diamond shape, you get a bit confused which direction the firepower sort of fires, so Y presses to the left, A is down, so A is up, or it does get a little bit confusing. This doesn't seem as fun to play as it does on the VS or the EXP. Now, one game that actually works quite well is Full Void. I'm surprised, this is a natively running game on Evercade. I thought it would have been unsupported, but it does actually work pretty well, utilising the joystick, which is quite a pleasant surprise. And it does sound very nice as well. So even games like Glover work on the alpha, although I don't think it feels that great on the joystick. I think the sensitivity is just a little bit too high for it to be actually playable, and yet it does utilise all the shoulder buttons, so you probably wouldn't want to play it this way on the alpha. You would probably want to try and install or put in another joypad to play this game properly, because as it stands, it's probably just a little bit oversensitive. Now, one thing I wanted to sort of clarify is that you can put in 2 cartridges sometimes and it will unlock a secret game, and in this instance it's the 2 Elco arcade carts that gives you the secret game called Bang. But obviously this game probably isn't ideal for any of the systems, to be honest, on Evercade. But anyway, that option is there. There are secret games that you can unlock with multiple carts inserted at the same time. So there is a list on evercade.info if you want to know the information, or you can just experiment yourself and try and find those secret games. Okay, something I wish to highlight is the loading times for PlayStation 1 games. Now in this instance, this is 40 winks, and the loading times for this is absolutely horrific, probably worse than the VS or the Evercade EXP. I'm not sure what's going on, but it seemed to take a good few minutes to actually load, and I actually thought at one point it had crashed, so hopefully there's a fix in place, because the loading times for this game specifically are bad. PlayStation 1 games are pretty slow in general to load. I actually think sometimes it'd be quicker to actually get your original PlayStation out and load the game that way, but it is what it is. Once they load, the games are absolutely fine. It just seems to take a long time to get started. There's no doubt the sound is pretty good on this device, but there are certainly some instances I felt that the sound is a little bit muffled. And the inbuilt arcade game's absolutely fine. I think it would definitely be more beneficial to have some sort of sound or speaker on the front of the unit as well, rather than being sort of isolated round the sides of the sort of arcade. But you see, obviously finally we've got this game loaded in, and it does look really nice. And playing with the joystick seems absolutely fine. Maybe perhaps a little bit oversensitive for playing these types of game, but it works pretty well, sounds well. Just those loading times are awful. But obviously the thing is here, a lot of these games will utilise L2 and R2, so you'll probably want to play these games with a joypad instead. Now you can also play a lot of different style games and television stuff being there, but this can be a little bit of a pain because you need to utilise the sort of on-screen keyboard, which can be a little bit of a pain. So you hold down the L1 button and select the amount of players, then you need to choose enter to get started. It doesn't control that well on the joystick, so ideally if you want to be playing this game, you really want to get a joypad rather than playing with the joystick. It really doesn't control nice at all. The character constantly gets stuck. Now, some games that work surprisingly well on this unit. This was a Game Boy Advance game called Racing Fever, and I actually surprised how well it controlled using the joystick. It seemed actually a lot better than playing it on the D-pad, which was kind of surprising to me. But anyway, I had a lot more fun playing it all with the joystick than at the actual D-pad when I first played this game. The controls are absolutely fine, and that definitely surprised me, and it probably brings me to a little point I was going to make here, that a lot of games you'll probably get some extra life out of them by playing them on the Alpha that you probably didn't play as much on the other Evercade systems. So that might be quite an intriguing thought for those on the fence thinking, do you need one? Maybe you do, because there's a lot of games here that get a second life, in my opinion, by playing them on the Alpha that actually feel quite right. Now, a lot of games feel quite wrong, there's no doubt about it, but there's quite a few games that I've played, and probably played lengthy periods of time because I just couldn't stop and was actually enjoying the experience, and that actually surprised me. And don't forget, you can also play some Amiga games as well. This is Quack from the Team 17 collection, and obviously these games should play really well because they were designed for a joystick originally, so a lot of these games should be very natural on the included joystick with the arcade machine, and happy to say they just seem seamlessly perfect for the Alpha. Now, I'm pretty sure not every game will work that well, but this one in particular, it looks fantastic on the Alpha, and it plays really well too. Now also, you can play Commodore 64 games. This is the classic Creatures, which is brilliant. It does look a little bit weird with the scan line still on right enough, but it does play really well, and it's perfectly fine with the joystick. Though I think in recent years I probably preferred playing this game on a D-pad, just for that more intricate movement, but on this joystick, happy to say it does control really well. Now, I would expect a lot of the sort of home computer games to be fine on the Alpha without having to utilise playing on a joypad, but there might be some odd one here or there that might not be quite perfect. Now, there's obviously a lot of games there that really don't work that well on a joystick. As you see, this is a good example, being Duke Nukem, and the fact that we don't have enough buttons as well to play these games, meaning you really have to play them with a joypad. Playing it with a joystick, forget about it. It's probably completely unplayable, way oversensitive, it just does not work. It's just a bit of a laugh, to be honest. But this is where our next section comes in. We're going to try playing with joypads or other sort of joysticks and seeing how that works, and we'll look at multiplayer as well. Okay guys, so looking at adding other joypads to play on the Alpha instead of playing games with the joystick. So all you have to do, if you want to play or override this as the first player, just insert this into the first USB slot, and then you should be able to control it as such. It's loading in the demo. So then you can control the screen utilising the D-pad on your added controller. Now this is obviously an Evercade controller. You should be able to add other controllers as well, which we'll have a look in a minute. But yeah, if you want to just play this, override this as the one player game, you can just jump into games the same way by utilising the controller, and that basically overrides what's happening here. You can still control the games utilising the joystick and the buttons here, but once this is actually plugged into the first USB slot, it basically overrides. And obviously we have the 4 shoulder buttons, which will help for certain games as well. So bear that in mind, whichever games you're playing. You may want to default to a joypad, especially if you're adding Evercade cartridges to your Alpha. Okay, so if you want to play 2-player games on your Alpha, you need to choose, put this into the second slot instead. You can't play 2-player games with it inserted into the first one. It has to be the second USB slot. So if you obviously want to play 2-player games at Knights of the Round, for example, the first player is on the joystick on the actual Alpha, the second player would be on the other joypad or other joystick, whichever method that you have there. So you just press select on the first player, select on this player, and then you can see here we now have 2 players. Press start button to choose, press start button on here, and now we have 2 players in action. Now, if you're going to play a 3-player game, you need obviously another joypad or something, so then you put another one into the first slot on the Alpha, and then you've obviously got 3 joypads on the go. Now, as we mentioned earlier in the video, you want to play a 3-player game. Now, there is only a few games that are compatible at the minute, and there is a list. I'll probably have to provide that in the description. Now, you want to play in 3-player mode, you choose this. This is just really for the inbuilt games. I'm not really sure about games that are on Evercade cartridges, how that works. We'll have a look at that in a second. You see here, we've got all 3 players going. We can then now play a 3-player game. Now, I'll have a look at maybe the Evercade cartridge. Make sure it does work the same way if you're playing a game or a 3 or 4-player game. Now, 4-player games won't work. There's not another slot, and as far as I know, the multi-tap option doesn't actually work. Okay, we've got micro mages here, and also I'm choosing the 3-player option. Yeah, so let's make sure they all control and get started. Now, I don't think you can utilise, so that's the first one. Let's see if the other ones work. So they don't actually work. Interesting. So the blue character doesn't work, so it only seems to recognise controller 1 and 3, so you can only actually play 2-player games. That's interesting. So you can't actually play any more than 2-player games on Evercade Carts at all. Very strange indeed. So just double checking that again, make sure I've done that right and inserted the controllers again. So we've got the first player controlling fine. Unfortunately, the joypad that's also inserted into player 1 slot, it also controls the purple man as well. And then we've got the other joypad in player 2 slot is controlling player 2. So there's no option there to play this 3rd player, or that would mean the 4th player definitely won't work at all. So it looks like we are restricted to playing only 2-player games at present with Evercade cartridges. I'm sure this might be fixed at some point down the line. They're going to have to probably patch a lot of these multiplayer games to make them compatible. Obviously you can play 2-player games absolutely fine, but anything more than that, it's not possible, except in the compatible games that's included with the Evercade Alpha. Okay guys, so I've got some helpers here, and I'm just trying to show playing 3-player games. Now this is only 2-player games at the present, so we've got one player on the actual Alpha and another player playing on a joypad. You can see here it's a little bit restricted, so you can imagine adding a 3rd player. I could probably stand back where obviously the camera is right now and play just about C, but it's probably not the ideal way of playing these games, as much fun as they actually are. It is a little bit tight. It is possible, but probably not ideal. Now try and get these guys off of this thing. So one thing I wanted to highlight, when I was playing some 3-player games, sometimes it didn't recognise the joypad and I had to reset, pull the cables out and put them back in, and then start the game again before it recognised all 3 sort of controller connections. Obviously it worked fine, but there was a few times it started it didn't recognise, perhaps it just didn't recognise the one that's plugged into the first port. It still thinks that's just the same player. So there's probably a little bit of a tiny bug there that's overriding the 3-player option, but it definitely did work. It's just that you've got some restricted sort of viewing angles when you're playing 3 players. Okay, so obviously I wanted to touch on 3rd-party controllers and trying to get them to work on the Evercade Alpha. However, this is an 8-bit do controller. This one wasn't recognised. I couldn't get it to detect. This one is like a knockoff PlayStation 2 controller from various emulation devices. Also uses a dongle, but this one wasn't recognised. Now both of these work on the VS, but they definitely don't work on the Alpha. Some work needed there. This one, it does detect. Eventually you can map it, which I'll show you now. Now this is the joystick, which I bought a purpose to play C64 games on the VS. Okay, so insert your joystick, joypad, whatever it is you're trying to do, then you go to the section. Now sometimes it might automatically detect it, other times if it doesn't you can try go to the options and you can try and map it in the options in system. Then go to map controller. Now go to the controller that you're using and hold down any button, and hopefully the selected controller will actually come up, and then you can then map the buttons as you see on the screen, and then just keep carrying on forth till you're finished, and then that controller should work. Now just obviously for the intents and purposes of this, I'm obviously utilising the controller. I'm obviously not touching the screen here, and then you can play your games utilising that. Now obviously choose your sort of controller wisely, because obviously not all the buttons on here can map to the actual controls. But anyway, you get the point. You can then play games with your chosen joypad or controller on the Alpha. Now obviously you can override some of the buttons that are missing by using the start, select and menu option on the Alpha, so you've got that option even if you are actually missing a few buttons. So it's not really a big problem. I'm not really sure playing this game with a C64 joystick is probably the best idea here. The button layout probably just doesn't seem right at all. Anyway, it does work. Okay guys, so final thoughts. I'll try and recap everything that we've done with the Evercade Alpha. I've tested every Evercade cart now, they all work. I had no massive issues. Sometimes slot 1 didn't actually recognise, which I put it into slot 2, it was absolutely fine. Not really sure what was going on there. But all carts do work. Not all games are currently supported. You see there are a few games not quite supported yet, but that should be fixed on a day 1 patch. Now another aspect we obviously need to cover is wear and tear. Now I have been told that this has been covered with some sort of paint or some sort of paint to sort of give it some durability, but I'm definitely worried that through time, if you've seen with a lot of these cabinets, they will probably get a little bit worn. Now I've already marked it in a few places. There's a little mark here and there. You can see I've even marked the screen over here, and I've still got these plastic things in. I need to take the screws out to get the plastic covering off properly, but I've definitely had a little mark here and there, and I wasn't even forcing it that much. So that is a little bit of a worry, but overall the build quality is very, very good. It is a very, very sturdy unit. I love the buttons, are really good, all very responsive. The joystick itself is very nice. It does have 8 directional controls. It does feel fantastic. However, something I think the grip probably isn't the best. Something I did slip a few times whilst controlling it. Maybe that was just a control issue. That was just me. It would probably be nice to actually change these, which I think you can. You can obviously open this up. And you can change the controls, the buttons, if you don't actually like them. Now we've got the Sanwa version coming soon at the end of the month, which I'll try and compare. There's obviously 2 versions. This is the standard version. You've got the Sanwa controls, deluxe version. But I have to say, I think the controls are generally absolutely fine. I didn't have any huge issues with these at all. Now for the best part, the sound is absolutely fine, but there are a few games here and there. It might depend on which emulator these things are actually using. I felt that the sound, it just felt muffled, as if it's somewhere in the background. It's just not that great. Now this is one example. Now I'm not picking on this game at all. Not picking on this game at all. I felt that the sound just felt really far away. It felt a little bit muffled. That's not the worst obviously, but I think this was just an example of some of the sound issues. But again, I think this might be down to the emulator that this game is actually using. Probably isn't the best. But overall, if you're playing arcade stuff, the sound is absolutely fine. Not amazing, but fine. So obviously, while we're still talking about sound, I did test the headphone jack with a couple of different headphone options, and the sound was absolutely fine. It was definitely a worry for me because using the sound on the EXP, some headphones were not compatible, but happy to say the sound was absolutely fine through the headphones that I tested for the Alpha. Now obviously controls will be a problem because not all the buttons are mapped on the Alpha. You're missing the R2 and L2 buttons. So if you are expanding your library, just remember you will have to utilise another joypad of some descriptions. Now not every joypad worked for me, or joystick. I had a few issues. Maybe that's going to be fixed on a day 1 patch, I hope. So there's no doubt that this is not for everyone. Priced at £200 now, is comparable. Obviously to other sort of products on the market. Now I have seen Capcom's own versions of these countertops, and they only have a couple of games on them, so this is definitely better. You've got 6 games, plus you can add Evercade games to this as well, so surely this is a very attractive if you are in the market for a countertop arcade unit. No doubt about it, it does revitalise a lot of games out there that actually surprised me play really well on this, that I probably haven't played that much on the other Evercade platforms. So there's certainly going to be a lot of games out there that will get a second lease of life playing it on this machine. There'll be a lot of people out there, just it's not going to be for them. You need to make sure you've got the space to put this unit, because it's not huge, but it's fairly sizable. And if you don't have the space, then it's really just going to sit around in the box. If you've got the space, happy days. It's very nice. It will look really nice if you've got some sort of gaming setup or a gaming room, for example. It is solid. The emulation is excellent for the best part, especially with the arcade titles. There's no doubt this is a very solid unit, possibly even one of the best devices that Blaze have made, no doubt about it. It is a little bit pricey. It's not going to be for everyone, and hopefully it will bring a lot of new people on board to Evercade and get them buying those carts, because that's probably what they're ideally wanting to happen. Crack that market in the US perhaps, and arcade market, and get more people buying more carts, make more money, that type of thing. It's obviously not the bargain budget model that the Super Pocket is. I don't think it's going to be as big seller as that is, because obviously that's a lot cheaper at 50 quid. It's certainly very intriguing to see how this will work. Will it be a big seller? Will it fail? I'm not so sure. I think it will be somewhere in the middle. I don't think it will be a huge seller, but I think it will do pretty well. So hopefully guys, I've covered everything in this video that I planned to do. If there's anything I missed, please drop me a comment and I'll try and answer it as best as I can. I absolutely love it. It is very, very cool. Not sure it's going to be anything more than a novelty though. Will I still be playing it in 6 months' time? Will I still be playing it? Will it just be a dust collector? It's one of those things that's going to be revealed through time. Anyways, thanks very much for watching. We'll catch you again in the next one. Bye for now.